Okay, so good evening. My name is Joey Zialcita, and I helped organize this event. So I'd have the pleasure of introducing our debaters for tonight. But before I introduce our debaters, I'd like to call Mr. John Paraiso, who co-hosted, my co-host and co-organizer for this event in the Agora.
Una-una, hi. Nagpapasalamat ako sa lahat ng nandito. Yung mga galing sa Pinoy 80s, tsaka sa Agora, yung galing sa ibang group, yung galing sa Luneta, kita tayo mamaya. Punta pa ako sa Luneta after this. Naka-uniforme ko pang Luneta. Okay, so, una-una, nagpapasalamat din ako kay Mr. Redentor and kay Mr. Don Paez, dahil kung hindi dahil sa kanila, walang magdedebate ngayon. Okay? So, this debate is halos 1 year ago. Yeah, I want to give you the story of this debate. The debate na muntika nang hindi matuloy. Si Red kasi, hindi pa siya membro ng Agora. Nagsulat siya, gumawa siya ng note. Nagpadala siya I think, sa FF and sa Patas. Sa huli na kami. Hindi ka naman nagpadala kagad sa amin. So, naghamon siya ng debate doon last. That was August. I think, no, that was July, somewhere lang ganyan, no? Yeah, basta that was 2012. 2012 or 2013. Okay. Now, what happened is, sa FF, hindi ata natuloy. Sa Patas, I thought matutuloy kasi may isang kumagat ng hamon. Kaya lang hindi rin natuloy. I do not know kung ano naging rason, but hindi natuloy. So, sumulat siya sa Patas, sa Agora. Sa Agora, ang sulat is something like this, 1 versus 3. Correct? Isa laban sa tatlo. Tatlong 80s, isa siya. So sabi ko, parang 3-in-1 coffee, hindi maganda. So, akala ko hindi na natuloy until dumating yung time na wala ng mga post. Then, nag-post siya ulit sa FF. That was August, yung huling post niya sa FF. And may isang member ng Agora na nag-ano ng kanyang mga sulat, nag-copy-paste, yung kinuha niya, photo capture, tapos nilagay niya sa Agora. Something like, parang takot yung mga 80s, labanan siya. I'm just telling the truth. Yun yung nakita ko eh. That is why kumagat ang Agora. And that is the history. Alam ko, dahil binantayan ko eh. Binantayan ko yun. And nagpapasalamat ako for one thing kay Don. Kasi, nang inano ni Don Paez, sabi niya, he will not represent any group. Doon nag-agree ang Agora because Agora is, ayaw namin na meron kaming, inkling kung kanino man. So when Don Paez said na, lalaban siya without representing any group, mas okay mas pabor sa amin yan dahil lalaban lang siya sa ACs. Then nagpapasalamat ako kay Sir Joey. Because kung hindi kay Joey, baka sa puno kami ilalim kami ng mangga, nagdebate. Malaki yung contribution niya. Look at this place. Even ako nagulat. And I never knew na magdedebate sa ganito. Akala ko hanggang ilalim lang kami ng puno ng saging. Pagpasensya niyo ng Agora, we're not that, no? But, papasalamat, thank you very much. And I was very pleased. And yeah, iyak ako. But seriously, this is not an Agora event. We supporting this because sa amin nabuo yung yung conversation eh. Kung babasahin niyo, hindi sa page ng Patas, hindi sa page ng FF eh. Sa page ng Agora nabuo yung usapan. And nagpapasalamat din ako. I have to be honest, wala akong kakampihan. Kasi both are now members ng Agora. One thing is, na pagmamalaki ko rito, here in Agora, hello, kasama ka doon. Here in Agora, hindi lang kami puro trolling. Nax, advertisement, hindi. Ibig sabihin, in Agora, we can do serious debate. This is the proof, and we're planning more to come this 2014. Activities, everything, na medyo ile-level up naman natin yung trolling business, tsaka yung mga debate, both on TAIS and ACS side. Kasi one thing na gusto naman i-promote ng Agora is to have a debate na hindi mauuwi sa babuyan, murahan. You know, intellectual masturbation, hindi yung ikaw yung nag-masturbate. Sorry, but I have to use the word. The issue here is, nagawa nga nila eh. Bakit hindi din namin kayang gawin na magdebate ng matino? Debate is not away. Debate is not away ng ego. Correct? Kami, muntikanan kami mag-away. Oh, yan, best friend ko ngayon. Hi. Yes. Catholic siya, atheist ako. But the thing is, sa debate kasi, as a political science graduate, hindi kami nagde-debate para away lang. It is a clash. It's a mental clash. Intellectual siya. And we want to bring back yung ganong element sa Agora na even mag-discuss tayo ng religious matters. It's not mauuwi lang yan sa insulto. Insult doesn't win a debate. It's how you yung intellectual capacity mo, being an atheist or a theist. So again, congratulations to everyone. It's your job. Ito gawa nyo to. This is your product. And I'm very happy with you all. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to now go and introduce our debaters for tonight. I'd start with Professor Red de la Rosa. So he flew all the way from Cagayan de Oro just to be with us tonight at his own expense. So this must be very important for you. I'd just like to give him a few background. He holds a master's degree in theology and in philosophy, published 2 books in philosophy, namely Introduction to Moral Philosophy and Anthropology-Based Ethics, and The Power of Logic. So he actually gave me a first edition signed copy of his book as Valentine's gift last night. So he's a Catholic apologist and he's currently teaching philosophy in a state university. So I personally debate Professor Red on his blog, The Catholic Position Explaining the Faith. And as John told us, we've been planning this debate for since last year. So everyone, let's give a warm applause to Professor Red. Ito naman, si Don Paez. Don Paez. We all know him. He doesn't need much introduction, but anyway, I'll just give a brief summary of his credentials. He's a member of the Philosophical Association of the Philippines since 2002, UST major in philosophy with emphasis in philosophy of the mind, UST master's degree in philosophy with emphasis in the philosophy of science. Okay. AB debate parliament speaker. Ano ba yung AB pare? Okay. Thomasian Debaters Council honorary member, moderator of Pinoy Exchange Realm of Thought, sales coach, financial advisor, and business unit manager. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend and financial advisor, Mr. Don Paez. Okay, so for some very quick administrative issues, please turn off your cell phones or put them in silent mode so as not to disturb our speakers. There are restrooms available on this floor. One is just nearby to the left as you exit. In case of fire, please use the stairs, and fire exits are on either side. There are drinks and some light meals available in the pantry. Our timekeeper for tonight will be Mr. Ron Jorge here in front. And finally, I hope you all find the debate tonight enjoyable, educational, and action-packed. We will have some audience participation later. there will be time for question and answers. Is that correct? Yeah? Please maintain proper decorum, civility, and respect as you engage the speakers later and all throughout the debate. Otherwise, you may have to deal with my associates, Tito, Vic, and Joey. The Barkads are here. Believe me, these big boys can prove God's existence way better than our debaters tonight because they can bring you directly to God. So without further delay, let me start with, as requested by Professor Red, let's start with Professor Red tonight for opening statements. So this is going to be a, 30 minutes opening statements?
It's true, no? I'm the one who really challenged all the groups. I think it's Patas, the Filipino Pre-Tingles, then the Agora. I challenge them not because I feel very, very confident, but because I crave to say something about this particular issue because as enthusiast of philosophy, I also really wanted to share knowledge. Okay, and of course, as a Catholic, devoted Catholic, I also wanted to share the Catholic faith because there are a lot of objections coming from atheists and agnostics that are really not really true because they misrepresent the Catholic teachings. So they are not criticizing the church, but they are criticizing what they think the church is. Okay. And regarding the 3 versus 1, it was not really exactly what I said is that the atheist camp may opt for 3 representatives, but the main debater, there is only one main debater. The two maybe it could be arranged in a way that they are given more time to ask questions and perhaps to make follow-up questions. This is a statement. I took this from an article written by, I don't know if you know, I am sure you know him very well because he is, I think, famous in the FF page. So let me just read it. It was perhaps impossible to have been an intellectually satisfied atheist until the discovery of relativity and quantum mechanics. The refutation of the Kalam heavily depends on the evidence that supports these theories. So this is in the conclusion of the article written by Garrick Rosero in the Filipino Pre-Thinkers page, The Eternal Universe, the title of that article. Now, that is a very big admission. No? An atheist who is also recognized, acknowledged, admitted that there is strength in the Kalam argument, to the point that he said that perhaps it was really impossible to be intellectually satisfied as an atheist. But today, because we have discoveries in modern science, namely quantum physics and relativity, then the atheist case is becoming stronger. So I think this is what I decided to address based on my discernment. I might not be hitting the right one, but this is what I believe to be, I think, the best that atheists now here in the Philippines are giving as an argument against theism. So in my presentation, I will respond to his article. Okay, hopefully it will have some bearing on the arguments of Sardon. So meaning to say, what I will going to do today are 2. Number 1, I will distinguish quantum physics from popular science, okay, because atheists thought that science is supporting the claim. And second, demonstrate why scientific and logical evidences actually proves theism and has nothing to do with the denial of the existence of God. Okay? Now, by doing these 2 things, I will only be using one argument, namely the cosmological argument. Don is very familiar with that. So I will not be giving him too many things to refute. So only one argument. The cosmological argument, what is it? We are very familiar with this. Number 1, it begins with the premise, everything that comes into existence is cause. Okay, that's very clear. Everything that comes into existence is cause. There is a cause for everything that comes into existence. Second, the entire physical order came into existence. So this is my version of the cosmological argument, because when you say the entire physical order, it includes the multiverse if they are true. Okay, because the multiverse belongs to the physical order. So if they are true, then they are also included on this second premise that together with our universe, they came into existence. 3, therefore, because the entire physical order came into existence, therefore the entire physical order is cause, based on premise 1. Now that cause we call God. And if we have time, I will be arguing that this cause, which we call God, is personal, immaterial, timeless, omniscient, and absolutely good. Okay, so this is the cosmological argument. Now, proof of the premises. I know that Don will agree with me that the syllogism in the cosmological argument is logically valid. Okay, meaning to say, there is no flaw in the syllogism. And all philosophers will agree to that. But some philosophers and atheists especially, they will disagree with the syllogism not on the sequence, validity of the sequence, but on the premises, namely the 2 premises. Okay, number 1 premise, everything that comes into existence is cause. The entire physical order comes into existence. Okay, and then the conclusion is wrong because they will argue that the 2 premises are wrong. Now, so my point here is to prove the premises, the validity and truthfulness of the premises. So we have premise 1. Everything that comes into existence is cause. To say that something pops into existence without a cause is to say that nothingness causes it. This is irrational and is a logical contradiction, a violation of the principle of identity. So this premise is true because if you will claim that something can come into existence without cause, is to say that it is actually caused by nothing, which is actually a violation of the principle of identity, because when you say it's nothing, it's really nothing. Okay? So meaning to say the proposition nothingness causes something to exist is analytically false. For Don knows what does analytically false means. Meaning to say you can derive from the idea nothing the idea that it cannot cause. Because it is nothingness, meaning to say you can also derive the idea that it cannot cause. So it is not only a synthetic proposition, meaning to say a proposition that is based on experience. You see things being caused by other things. So therefore, we derive the premise that everything comes into existence is caused. Yes, that's true. But also, this premise is also analytically true. It is both a synthetic proposition and an analytic proposition. Because to deny this cause is to say that nothingness causes that something to exist, which is irrational. Okay? And now, what if you will say, actually, it is not caused by nothing. But if you say that it is not caused by nothing, is to say that it is caused by something. Okay? If you will say that it is not caused by nothing, then actually you are saying that it is caused by something. There is no middle alternative. So when you say that something exists without a cause, you are claiming that it is caused by nothing. Now, if you will not accept that, if you will not say that it is caused by nothing, then you are also saying that it is caused by something. Okay, so therefore, it proves the premise that everything that comes into existence is cause. Now, what if you will say, to say that it spontaneously comes into existence is to claim that nothingness can have a capacity to make something emerge spontaneously. This is a contradiction since it is to make nothingness as really something. Okay, you cannot say that it is caused by nothing. You will not say it is caused by something. So you will just say it spontaneously comes into existence. But if you say it spontaneously comes into existence, you are saying that nothingness has a capacity, potentiality, to make something spontaneously come into existence. Now, in that case, you are contradicting yourself because nothingness means nothingness. It's absolutely nothing. There is no potentiality that makes something spontaneously come into existence. If you admit that there is potentiality to that nothingness, then that nothingness is not really nothing. We need to say you are contradicting yourself. Now, so those were the proof for the premise one. But there are objections coming from atheists. Number one, not everything that begins to exist has a cause. This was taken from the article, The Eternal Universe. I will just read some quote from that article. He used the example of electron emitting a photon. Okay? This is what he said. When an electron increases in energy to an excited state and returns to its ground state, a photon appears. This appearance of the photon occurs spontaneously and is not a deterministic consequence. So for him, that's a proof that not everything that comes into existence is caused because the photon existed spontaneously without a cause. But is that scientific? Is that what really quantum physics is telling us? No. There is a very big no. Okay, so this is what I call popular science, not quantum physics. This is my reply. Actually, an electron is excited by a photon and re-emit the photon with the same frequency. Why is it that the electron, when it is excited and go back to its state of rest, will emit a photon? Because the electron is excited or made into vibration by the photon itself. Okay, we need to say the electron is just simply reflecting the photon. That's what quantum physics is telling us. For example, the light here is hitting my skin. My electrons in my skin are vibrating, they are oscillating. And the cause of that oscillation are the photons of the light. But the electrons will return to its ground state, meaning to say it will reflect the photons when it returns into ground state. So the photon already existed because of the light, and then the electrons are vibrated, and then re-emitted the photon. That's what quantum physics, that's very simple. You can read that in any college physics book. The photon already existed. It was the cause of the excitation or oscillation of the electron. Or we can also call it vibration, because sometimes electrons are modeled as a wave. The electron now re-emits it as a photon, or not all the photons are re-emitted. It depends on the frequency, the natural frequency of the electrons. Because some photons with different frequencies are absorbed by the object and is transformed to a random kinetic energy. And because of that, it makes the object warmer. Okay, so it absorbs that energy and it turns into heat. But the frequency that match with the frequency of the vibration of the electron is re-emitted, but the other frequencies are absorbed. Okay, so we call that resonance. Okay, the electrons resonates with the frequency of the other photons, and so it does not emit but absorb the light, the other light. Because we know there are different frequencies in light. I think all of us know that, maybe many of us know that. I will not go to that in detail. Now, the article, The Eternal Universe, uses another example. The example is atomic nuclei decay or radiation. Okay, this is the second objection. Atomic nuclei of radiative elements spontaneously emit alpha particles. They exist without cause. Is that true? That is not scientific. This is what the article said. We can know the probability of decay, but it is impossible to say exactly when the decay will occur. This is the reply. alpha particles actually already existed inside the atomic nucleus. They are emitted because of radiation and decay. Why? Because, no, not yet. Quantum physics has a relatively complete explanation of this phenomenon, leading actually to the nuclear fission technology or atomic bomb, also nuclear reactors. Photons in the nucleus mutually repel each other, and the strong nuclear force is what binds them together with the neutrons. But for elements with nucleus having more than 82 protons, we need to say elements higher than or bigger than lead, the electric force between protons overcome the nuclear force. In the nucleus of the atom, it is composed of neutrons and protons. Now, protons are positively charged. Because of that, they repel each other. Okay? Now, why is it that they don't fly away from each other? It's because of the presence of the nuclear force. Now, the nuclear force has a certain has an exact amount of force. For elements whose atoms have a larger number of protons, the nuclear force is overcome by the electric force that exists between the protons mutually repelling each other. So that's why we have acceleration of radiation. Okay, so alpha particles are emitted. Actually, not only alpha particles, but also beta rays. Beta rays are electrons, and then gamma rays. Gamma rays is a photon in the frequency of gamma. Okay. So the author actually has completely forgotten that the examples photon, emission, and atomic decay are about change state. They have nothing to do with causal existence. Okay, so for the premise one, therefore, there's nothing in science that proves that something can exist without a cause. So the premise is true. Now let's go to the second premise. The entire physical order came into existence. The meaning of entire physical order includes not only our universe, but all other universes, if they are true. Now, to say that the physical order has no beginning in existence, is to say that it has existed for an infinite range of time. But an infinity, by definition, means can't be reached. That's the definition of infinity. It cannot be reached. So therefore, infinity cannot be actualized or completed. Meaning to say the universe cannot exist in infinite time. Because how do we define infinity? It means it cannot be reached. So meaning if you say that the age of the universe has reached into infinity, then that's a contradiction of what you're saying. Meaning to say, the proposition actual infinity can't exist is analytically true. Okay, so we have examples of non-termination, non-terminating decimals. We call that potential infinity, but not actual infinity. They cannot really actually reach infinity. The fact that you can always add to another decimal is because you can never end in adding. Why is it that you can never end in adding? Because every time you add, the result is always finite. Okay, it's always finite. That's why you can always add. Because if it is already infinite, then you cannot add anymore. That's what we mean by indefiniteness. Okay, there is an objection from the article. Infinity means it cannot be reached, but the physical order is still infinite in time. Yes, this is counterintuitive. Okay, this is the common argument for the impossibility of infinity. But as written in the article, it is important to note, however, that counterintuitive results show up in science all the time. The greatest example is the discovery of wave-particle duality. A particle can be at many places at the same time. Is this science? No. This is science. The particle-wave duality is not counterintuitive. It's quite understandable. This duality does not mean that a thing can be a particle and a wave at the same time in the same respect. What it means is that a photon, for instance, can be modeled as a wave or as a particle depending on the circumstance. Okay, so it depends on the circumstance. This is what we can read from this book. Each single photon has wave properties as well as particle properties. But the photon displays different aspects at different times. Okay? A photon behaves as a particle when it is being emitted by an atom or absorbed by a photographic film or other detectors, and behaves as a wave in traveling from a source to the place where it is detected. So it is in different circumstances. So the photon strikes the film as a particle, but travels to its position as a wave that interferes. Okay, so there is no non-intuitive result in science. It's very intuitive. It cannot be both particle and wave at the same time, in the same respect. It can be particle in a certain circumstance, another in wave, a different circumstance. This one is the same, but different page. The Danish physicist Niels Bohr, one of the founders of quantum physics, formulated an explicit expression of the wholeness inherent in this dualism. He called his expression of this wholeness complementarity. As Bohr expressed it, quantum phenomena exhibit complementary, mutually exclusive properties. Mutually exclusive, meaning to say they cannot be both wave and particle at the same time, in the same circumstance, because they are mutually exclusive. If it is wave at that circumstance, it cannot be at the same time particle. Okay, appearing either as particles or as waves, depending on the type of experiment conducted. That's very clear. Experiments designed to examine individual exchanges of energy and momentum bring about particle-like properties, while experiments designed to examine spatial distribution of energy bring out wave-like properties. Which part is emphasized depends on what a question one puts to nature. This one is from a different book, The Ideas of Particle Physics, An Introduction for Scientists, Cambridge University Press, 2006. Adoption of the Broglie's idea requires the comprehensive assimilation of particle-wave duality. For any entity in the microworld, there will be situations in which it is best thought of as a wave, and situations in which it is best thought of as a particle. So different situations. So the objection that some non-intuitive results can be accepted by science is impossible. I will leave this to... So conclusion for premise 2. The entire physical order came into existence because it cannot existed for infinity, because infinities cannot be actualized, because that's its meaning. Infinity cannot be reached. So we cannot really have an actual infinite number of time. Now that is counterintuitive, yes, but at the same time scientific also. Okay? So I will go now to the conclusion. Therefore, the entire physical order is cause. So because the two premises are true and valid, the conclusion is true and valid. To say that it has no cause is to say that it existed for an infinite range of time. But this is false as demonstrated above. Objection 1. The universe came from nothing, quantum vacuum. Okay, random fluctuation in quantum vacuum. But this argument is silly since the quantum vacuum is far from nothing. It assumes a lot of things. Okay, we know physicists are very imaginative. Okay, they imagine a lot of things. Objection 2. Virtual particles pop out of nothing spontaneously. Reply. The nothing meant here is a quantum vacuum with at least a sea of negative energy particles and electromagnetic energy, photons. That's not nothing. Okay, particles pop out of them, not nothing. This is what we can read from that book I quoted. Okay, we suggested that an energetic photon. Okay, that's the proof, but that's it. Okay. Objection 3. The universe came from nothing, absolute nothingness. So Don knows what this means, philosophical nothing. But this is irrational and illogical. Nothingness cannot be conceived as a conceptual or factual background out of which something may proceed. So conclusion for 3, it is now a premise because we have the fourth conclusion. Therefore, the entire physical order is cause, because it is true, because we cannot regress to infinity, because infinities by definition cannot be reached. Then it cannot come from nothing, as meant by physicists, because they are nothing is not really nothing, so they assume that as pre-existent already. And then it cannot come from the absolute nothingness, because nothingness means nothingness. So the only conclusion left is that it is caused by God. There is no other alternative conclusion. We know that. You cannot say that we actually don't know. No, we know that, because that is the only conclusion that is left in our reason. Logic tells us that is the only conclusion that is acceptable. Infinity cannot be acceptable. Nothingness, absolute nothingness is not acceptable. Quantum vacuum is not acceptable. So we only have one alternative conclusion. That is, there must be a God that has created the entire physical order. What is this? The necessity of... how about natural mechanisms? The same. No? If you regress back to pre-existing natural mechanisms, it's useless, because you can still ask, what is the cause of those natural mechanisms? So, meaning to say, you have to conclude that there is God that is outside the natural mechanism, so that you can go out from the issue of regression. Okay. How about Zeus, spaghetti monster, aliens, giant computers, etc.? No, these are not valid conclusion, because they all belong to the physical order. We know what Zeus is. He is a son of other god, and he has body. He occupies space. Now, if you occupy space, then you belong to the physical order. Then you are also in time. So the only conclusion is you go outside of time, so that there's no more regression back in time. Okay, spaghetti monster belong still the same. So only a creative will is capable of bringing something into existence without employing pre-existent materials. Conclusion for premise 4. This cause is God, personal, immaterial, timeless, omniscient, and absolutely good. Why? Because the universe, or the entire physical order, is finite in time. Meaning to say, it has a beginning in existence. So to go outside of that dilemma, you have to conclude, necessarily, take note, this is a necessary conclusion, logical necessity, that there must be a being that is outside the sequence of time, which has no beginning, meaning to say, he has no beginning because he is eternal, and he is outside space. Because to be in space is to be in time. So if God is the creator, the originator of everything, he must be outside space and outside time. Okay? There are some objections here. Okay. I still have time. I will just clarify the conclusion. Again, the entire physical order is finite. It has beginning in existence. And then we don't have any other alternative, because any other alternative will still belong to the physical order. So it will still require a cause. So the only logical option is to posit the existence of a being that is outside space and time, so that you will not ask anymore what is the cause of God, because that is actually the conclusion. God is not assumed as a circular argument, but it is the necessary conclusion of the finitude of our physical order. Without God, there's a problem with explaining the universe. Okay, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Agora, Filipino Freethinkers, Pinoy Atheist, PATAS, the St. Peter's Society of Men, thank you all for being here. Well, that was interesting. I think this is the first time which we'll see a debate about the existence of God, with the theist coming up with scientific proof and the atheist going very philosophical. Okay, most of the time, it's the atheist that talks about science and the theist that goes philosophical. Okay. But anyway, please bear with me on this. So, ayan. These are my credentials. I think it's already mentioned before. Why did I put them here? Well, nothing really, but just to say that credentials do not matter in a debate because only arguments matter. I might be a doctor, I might be a multi-degree holder, but if what I'm saying is wrong, no amount of degrees, no amount of credentials will make me right. Is that right? Okay. The ancient oracle Socrates says that Socrates is the wisest of all Greeks. Socrates is actually my idol. Why? Because he professes to know nothing. And he says that I am the wisest of all because only I am aware of my own ignorance, while all the others claim to know, but in truth, they do not know about their own ignorance. Now, before we proceed to the topic, does God exist? Perhaps we should first ask, philosophically speaking, can anything be known to exist? I recall a philosophical problem before where a professor was asking a student, prove this chair. And then the student will say, what chair? And then nakauno siya. Okay? Probably you're familiar with that. Why? Because in philosophy, practically anything goes. So we have to first be able to determine what it means to know something and what it means for something to exist. Okay. In other words, we have to address the questions first. What is knowledge and what is existence? In philosophy, there's such a subject that we call epistemology. It's a study of how we arrive at knowledge. It's a study of how we think. Knowledge, as it is most popularly described in philosophy, has three elements. Knowledge is basically a justified true belief, meaning that knowledge has to be believed. Knowledge has to be warranted or justified. And knowledge has to be true. Without these three, you cannot really proclaim knowledge. First, knowledge involves belief. And what is belief? Belief is simply mental assent. It is a conscious judgment, a conscious choice on whether I will believe or I will doubt something. Correct? That is simply what belief is. I either believe something or I don't believe something. On the other hand, a warrant or a justification for something, well, it's one thing to believe something, it's another thing to be able to justify that belief. Like, for example, if I believe that I have 1,000,000 pesos, can I convince you right away that I have 1,000,000 pesos? No, I still have to justify it, correct? So I have, or you have, to ask some questions first in order for you to be able to know whether you really know something. First, do I have enough reasons to believe in something or a specific claim? Now, if you have enough reasons, you have to ask next, are these reasons actually relevant? Because these reasons might not have any connection. Like, for example, I believe that the earth is round. Do I know that the earth is round? Well, let's say, how do I justify it? Well, I think it's because the soles of my feet are curved, and because the soles of my feet are curved, the earth must be round. Is it warranted? I don't think so. Or how about this? I know that 16 over 64 is equal to 1/4. How do I know that? Because if you erase the 6 in the 16 and you erase the 6 in the 64, you get 1/4. Diba? Can I really say that I know that 16 over 64 is 1/4 just because of that? So, is my method of reasoning reliable? That's one other thing to be able to proclaim that you really know something. Because even if you believe something, but you don't have any warranty, you're not warranted, you haven't justified believing in it, you cannot claim knowledge. And then lastly, is it true? Because you cannot claim to know something and yet that something is not true. Now, there are three major theories of what truth is. You know, in philosophy, there's no such thing as an absolute standard or an absolute saying. Everything is subject to questioning. But so far, these three theories have managed to stand the test of time, at least so far. You have the theory of truth with regards to correspondence. Something is true if, and only if, it corresponds to an external reality, an objective reality that you can actually verify. For instance, if I say, the King of the Philippines has a wig, am I saying something that is true? How do I know? Well, I say here, the King of the Philippines has a wig. In the first place, we ask, do we have a King of the Philippines? No. So, can I say that what I'm saying is true, according to correspondence theory? No. But there are other theories of truth. You have the coherence theory. That a coherence theory, it means the truth of a statement actually depends on its cohesiveness, its compatibility with other statements. Like, for example, I say that my suit is black. And still, I say that my suit is not white. Okay? Are these two compatible? Yeah. So it might be true. But if I say that my suit is black, and then I say that my suit is not black, can you consider that as true? No. Why? Kasi these two statements are not coherent with each other. In fact, they conflict with each other. In fact, they contradict each other, meaning if one is true, the other statement must be false. If one is false, the other statement must be true. And lastly is the pragmatic theory of truth. That if something is true, then it must be useful. How do you know that engineering is true? Then you can make vehicles, you can make buildings, you can make gadgets, you can make any sort of things. It can bring men to the moon. That is why engineering, mathematics, science is considered as true, at least for the time being. Okay, so these are theories of truth. Remember, knowledge is a belief which is justified and which is considered as true. So, in other words, knowledge is a belief that involves mental agreement. Knowledge is a properly justified claim. Okay? It's warranted and it uses proper principles of reasoning. It involves sufficient evidence, enough for you to believe it. It is internally and externally consistent, meaning you have a referent in reality. And it actually has a real benefit in terms of real-world usefulness. Knowledge is not a poorly justified claim using faulty reasoning and using weak evidence. Knowledge is not inconsistent, and knowledge is not opposed to observation and verification. In other words, if you know something, you can justify it. Okay? Whatever claims that comes your way, you are consistent. When you say yes, you say yes. When you say no, you say no. And you're not afraid to put things under a microscope. Now, we've already addressed what knowledge is. How about existence? Existence is very simple. It means for something to exist, it must be objectively real. Okay? For example, is it reasonable to believe that there is such a thing or such an entity as gold? Is it? Okay? Is there such a thing as gold? Well, we have to look first. How do we get our idea? What is our process of idiogenesis? You get the concept of gold. But where do you get the concept of gold? Of course, from experiencing particular things that are made of gold or that are colored as gold. You first see a gold ring. You see a gold bar. You see a gold statue. Okay? And then from that golden statue, you eliminate the particularities. Like, for example, it's in the shape of a ring. It's in the shape of an earring. It's in the shape of a statue. And then you simply abstract all the qualities that make it gold. Like, for example, its atomic number 79. Its atomic mass of 196. It has a certain melting point. It has a certain boiling point. You have standards. So meaning, if you encounter something that looks like gold but does not conform to these standards, what does that mean? It means it's not gold. Either that or you change your standards of what gold is. Now, if you have that idea of gold, you can now extend that idea into particular instances. Then you will know, I already know I can say what gold really is. Okay? Now, we go to the question. Is it reasonable to believe that God exists? Well, based on the example earlier of gold, it's reasonable to believe that gold exists because we encounter gold, we have a standard of gold, we can see the extensions of what gold is. But let's look. How about God? Has anybody encountered God face to face? Anybody sent an invitation to God for tonight? Nobody? Okay. Does anybody have a concrete idea of God? I mean, really concrete. Who He is, where does He live, okay. Vital statistics, phone number, if He has one. Okay. Or how about the standards? What are the standards for us to be considered, or for something to be considered as God? What, just because He's all-powerful, He's already God? Just because He's immaterial, He's already God? And what are the extensions? What are the particular instances of God? Well, the answer is, we don't have any answer. Okay, so how do we know what God really is? Now, the task here, or the task of my opponent here, Red, is to be able to convince us, does God exist? Well, he's supposed to say, yes. What is the best means of convincing somebody of anything? Well, you have logic. Okay? Emotion could do. Like, for example, Red could say, believe that there is a God or else makakatikim ka. Okay? But then that's a good way. I might believe in God. But what about if that threat is taken away? Will I still believe? Probably not. The only way by which I will properly believe, and believe with all my heart, is when I'm convinced here and when I'm convinced here. Okay? But the only way to get through here is here. For example, I am in the world of finance. I will ask for 1 million pesos from you guys. Will you give it to me right away? Will you believe me when I say that I can make it grow by around 20, 30% every year? Will you believe me automatically? No. You will ask for proof. You will ask for arguments. And that is why argumentation is still the best way to convince somebody of anything. Argumentation involves arguments. Arguments are simply collection of statements or words. Now, there are two kinds of words in an argument. You have statements that claim something. You call them the conclusion. You have statements that support that claim. You call them premises. And through the process of inference, the process of trying to think properly, you should be able to arrive from a premise to a conclusion. Red's task is very simple, to provide a proper argument for the existence of God. I can name a lot of arguments, okay, for the existence of God, but there are two main kinds of arguments. You have deductive arguments and inductive arguments. Deductive arguments is similar to what Red gave earlier, the first one, okay, that anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That's a deductive argument. The strength of a deductive argument comes from its structure and form, meaning any word that you put there, it will be true. Because the form is there, the structure is there, the truth is automatically preserved from premise to conclusion. So as long as you accept the premise, then you have to accept the conclusion, which is why Red was earlier stating na don't knows this, don't accept this. Now, there are certain fallacies though, but I will not get into this tonight, or else we might stay here until 9. But let's go to induction. In induction, the premises just have to show enough support for the conclusion. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you have the premises, the conclusion is certain, but there is a good reason, okay, to provide support for the conclusion. Like, for example, I tell you to buy a lotto ticket today. Okay? That is my claim. That is the conclusion that I want you to accept. My premise, the reason is because there is a 75% chance that you are going to win. Is that good enough? Okay? Compared to the normal 15 billion chance? Well, yes, of course. On the other hand, if I do not show enough support for the conclusion, then that is not a very good inductive argument. Like, for example, earlier, 16 over 64 is 1/4. You just eliminate the 6. Okay? Okay. The fallacies of inductive argumentation involve irrelevant premises where the premises have very little to do with the conclusion, weak induction or weak generalization, fallacies of presumption, claiming the conclusion even before it's proven, and ambiguity, trying to confuse people with words. So let's go for the arguments for God. Deductive arguments, you have quite a bit. You have Anselm's ontological argument, you have the Cartesian cogito argument, you have Leibniz's best of all possible worlds argument. Actually, I was expecting some of these to come forth. Okay. In inductive argumentation, the truth of the premises do not necessarily guarantee the proof that God exists, but at least give us sufficient reason that it might be good to believe in a God. Okay? These are some examples. The design argument. You have Pascal's wager, which is probabilistic, and some scientific arguments like what Mr. De La Rosa has given. Now, the scientific arguments go way, way back to ancient Greece, even from Aristotle. Aristotle determined 4 specific causes. Actually, his argument from causality was derived from Aristotle. Let me just explain it a bit. Aristotle said that there is a material cause of things, there is a formal cause of things, there is a final cause of things, and there is an efficient cause of things. For example, this chair. What is the material cause? Plastic. What is the material cause of plastic? Oil. What is the material cause of oil? Dead dinosaurs, and so forth. The formal cause is the shape, the contours. Okay, what makes a chair a chair? The final cause of the chair is for somebody to sit on, or the purpose. And the efficient cause is the person who made the chair. Aristotle simply says that the efficient cause of the universe, the intelligence behind it, should be God. Okay. It's the same with the Thomistic 5 ways. It's the same with the Kalam cosmological argument. And it's the same way with the recently revived William Lane Craig's cosmological argument, which is what Red is actually flashing with us today. Okay. Let us look at the Kalam cosmological argument, aka the Kalam. The Kalam is simply an argument for an existence of a first cause. So this debate is mainly centered around the concept of causality. It can actually be traced to medieval Muslim thinkers. So it's not a Christian argument, it's actually a Muslim argument. And if you go further, it's a Greek argument, probably an argument for Zeus. Kalam simply means words, discussion, debate, discourse. And the Kalam is simply stated as this. Oh, by the way, Al-Kindi was an ancient Muslim philosopher that formulated the argument into words. He said that every being which begins has a cause for its beginning. Now, the world is a being in which begins. Therefore, it possesses a cause for its beginning. Is it familiar? Yes, because that's the argument we heard earlier. Now, here's William Lane Craig's version. Everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause for its existence. Roughly the same. But the thing is, he changed the meaning of the words a little bit. In order for him to escape the intricacies that actually plague the Kalam cosmological argument, he tried to distinguish infinity, the 2 kinds of infinity. He distinguishes potential infinity, which is numbers, from actual infinity, which is actual physical objects. And says that actual infinity is impossible, and this applies both physically and metaphysically. Why? Because actual infinity is a contradiction in terms. Okay? He actually said earlier that actual infinity is impossible is a tautology. Tautology means always true. So, however, he says that potential infinity is still possible, counting numbers, because a potential infinite at any particular point in time is finite. Like, for example, you count from 1 to infinity, and then you suddenly ask, what number are you now? I'm at number 3,486. Oh, that's limited. Okay, that's not yet infinite. Okay. Now, there are some premises that support this. His premise number 2, the universe began to exist, rests on these sub-premises. He says that an actual infinite cannot exist. Okay, fine, let's examine that later. An infinite temporal regress of events is an actual infinite. Like, for example, if time was extended onto infinity over the past, that's an actual infinite. And since actual infinite cannot exist, then there is no such thing as an infinite temporal regress as to the history of the universe. That means that at some point in time, the universe must have started somewhere and some time, which actually makes sense, okay, at first. So in summary, for William Lane Craig, the universe, since it began to exist, and anything that begins to exist has a cause, okay, then the universe has a cause. So here comes the clincher. Do you know that that cause is God? And therefore, God exists. On the other hand, the Kalam cosmological argument has some problems of its own. William Lane Craig and Aristotle and Al-Kindi said that an infinite regress is impossible. How about an infinite progress? It's impossible to extend back in time, but it's still impossible to extend forward in time. Let's look at this. Here's a nice story that I've seen over the internet. There was this one skeptic that died, and to his surprise, he found himself before the pearly gates facing Saint Peter, the guardian of heaven. Is this heaven? He asked. Saint Peter said, as a matter of fact, it is. Welcome to heaven. Okay? And Saint Peter, all the people here, are they happy? Saint Peter says, yes, they are. They are blissfully happy. And the skeptic will say, will they be happy eternally? What does that mean? Because if heaven exists, it means that there is such a thing as an infinity forward in time. Correct? But for William Lane Craig, I thought infinity was impossible. It is still possible to have an infinity which goes forward. Although it doesn't have although an infinity going to the past is impossible, an infinity going to the future is possible. Now, some might argue, well, that's not yet an actual infinity, that's still potential infinity, but because it hasn't happened yet. And then simply I will say, on the contrary, it is an actual infinity. Why? Because God has already determined in His omniscience that it is going to happen. In other words, in His timeless mind, it has already happened. It's an actual kind of infinity that already exists. So the Kalam cosmological argument actually shoots itself in the foot. First, it says that an actual infinite is impossible, and then after proving that God exists, an actual infinite is actually possible. In our discussion earlier about knowledge, I talked about the consistency criteria for truth, right? Is the Kalam cosmological argument consistent? In that, it says infinity is impossible, and then suddenly infinity is possible. I don't think so. Okay? So how about the pragmatic theory of truth. What has Kalam given us so far? The Kalam cosmological argument. In terms of real-world benefit, pragmatic results. Is there anything? I don't think so. How about referent in reality? What's this? Correspondence theory. Does God conform to anything that we see in reality? I mean, when we say God, can we point at any particular referent for it to be considered as true? No? No. Okay. By all intents and purposes, it seems that the Kalam cosmological argument sounds good, okay, as presented to us earlier. But whether it is warranted, whether it is justified, whether it is true, it seems to fall short. But what is sure is that the Kalam cosmological argument is based on a belief. Okay? But the problem with belief is that if it has no justification, what can be asserted by belief can simply be dismissed by belief. I could just as easily say, I do not believe that, and that is that. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate only circles around one thing. You have a claim, give enough justification for it. Because if you do not give enough justification for it, then nobody will believe you. But remember that the claim that you're trying to prove is that God exists. And as you all know, extraordinary claims require extraordinary benefit. In investment, it translates to the higher the potential reward, the higher the risk. What do I risk when I believe in God? Well, I risk my freedom of thought. I risk my lifestyle. I will risk my personal contacts, my relationship with the people that I might have otherwise went well with, but now I am actually at war with, okay, because of my religion. So, do the benefits outweigh the risk? Am I justified in believing in the existence of God? Does the theist camp give me enough to believe? Okay. Not necessarily absolute, but just enough. Because for an extraordinary God, then I will require an extraordinary amount of evidence. And I would highly suggest that if I keep myself to that standard, then each one of you will do likewise. Do not just believe, ask for evidence. Thank you very much.
So I have a little benefits to Salvador. Don't give points to argue the good one is the Kalam is inconsistent. Okay, number two, there is no pragmatic result. Then number three, it violates the correspondence theory of the truth. A statement must have something that corresponds to it to say that it's true. And then God is based only on your belief, no justification. Every belief in two and three, there is no pragmatic result to the truth. This is simply a fallacy, okay, non-sequitur. If you believe God, it's God that there is no pragmatic result whatsoever, doesn't follow that God. Okay? Example, there are other galaxies in the universe, very far from us. It has no connection with our existence, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. Because they are. If God exists, He exists, even without any effect on us. Okay? The number three objection is it violates the correspondence theory. We need to say, if it is true, then that statement that God exists must correspond to something. Yes, it really corresponds to something. That's why I am arguing that God exists is true. It corresponds to an objective reality. But you will say, we can't see God. Well, it doesn't follow that God doesn't exist. Okay? So using the Kalam argument, it proves that God exists. So that statement is not a nonsensical statement because there is an objective reality corresponding to the statement that God exists. We just have see God, but again, that is also an example of a non-sequitur. It doesn't follow that you cannot see God, God doesn't exist. Okay? Because according to Kalam argument, God exists as an explanation of the finitude of the physical world. Then we read multiverses, but still that is not help because the multiverse, the existence of the multiverse is still really finite in time. So you still have to postulate as a logical necessity the existence of God. To say that there is a correspondence to objective reality because we cannot see God is fallacy or non-sequitur. It doesn't follow. Now, the another objection is that God is based on belief, no justification. Then I think I have demonstrated here a very clear proof for the existence of God. The universe is finite in time. According to the entire physical order, this includes the multiverses without any. It is always finite in time because there is no such thing as actual infinity. So it always has a beginning. Whatever the mechanism that started these multiverses, that too has a beginning in time because it's a mechanism that leads to the universe. But how do we explain that mechanism? It has also a beginning in time. So necessarily, logic or reason tells us that we have to postulate the existence of a timeless God so that there is we can have explanation for the existence of the universe. Otherwise, if there is no God, then there is also the universe. But we have the universe, therefore it follows to this one logically that there is God. Now, how about the argument that the Kalam argument is inconsistent? What was the point of God? He said that the Kalam argument rests on the premise that there will be infinities. Actually, it's not the original argument of the dream. It's actually the original argument of St. Thomas Aquinas. If you read the Summa Theologica, Thomas Aquinas said that there can never be infinite multitude and magnitude because multitude and magnitude fall under the class quantity, and quantity on numbers either scalar or vector is always finite. You cannot replace infinity or replace infinity. So is it just inconsistent? Because the Kalam is postulating the existence of God. So therefore, in the mind of God, this infinity has been actualized already. No, because the progress of the universe will never be infinite. It will always be finite. That is precisely the reason that God can comprehend the past and future of the universe. Because it can never be infinite. Because infinity can never be achieved. It can never be actualized. Because the meaning of infinity is it can never be reached. So, if you regress back in time, you will always have a point which is finite. If you progress forward, it will never become infinite. Actually, it is not a future, but it is a finite present. No matter how long we progress in time, it is always the finite present. And God will always, because we have concluded the existence of God, will always comprehend that finite present. So, you progress infinity, indefinitely, non-termination. But every time you extend forward is the present. So that's finite. You forward again, that's the present. You can never reach infinity. So in the mind of God, the entire history of the universe will always be finite. So it is not inconsistent because the Kalam argument postulating the existence of God does not contradict the premise that infinities cannot exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now here's the thing. If you have a Kalam argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Kalam argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Prof. argument, you have to have a Paez. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Zialcita argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Prof. argument, you have to have a Paez. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Zialcita argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Zialcita argument, you have to have a Paez. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Prof. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Zialcita. If you have a Paez argument, you have to have a Prof. If you
that there are only two kinds of infinities, and one of them cannot exist. One is the potential infinity, and that infinity can exist. Why? Because it can never be complete. On the other hand, the actual infinity is an infinity that cannot exist. And I think this actually made that very, very clear. But, since there are only two kinds of infinity, and supposedly God is the epitome of infinity, then there are only two possibilities. God is either potentially infinite, or God is actually infinite. Now, we did say that actual infinities cannot exist, right? So if God is an actual infinity, then He cannot exist. On the other hand, if God is a potential infinity, then it might still be possible for God to exist. Then again, there's a problem. Potential infinity is never complete. Can we have a perfect being, which as He said, God is? It is not complete. No. Can we have an omniscient being that has incomplete knowledge? No. Can we have an omni-benevolent, an all-powerful being that has neither full power nor full goodness? No. Actually, defeats the definition. That's an oxymoronic statement. Diba? An omniscient being that has not complete knowledge. Okay, here's the thing. So regardless, but I think, I'm not sure how Red is going to justify that God is a potential infinity, or that God has somehow become a possible actual infinity, despite what Craig claims. Here's the thing. Craig's argument relies so heavily on the concept of causality. But recent developments of physics have actually invalidated that concept. That version of causality might have been true in the time of Aristotle, it might have been true in the time of Aquinas, but we do not understand causality in the same way anymore, even actually in the start of the 18th, the 19th century. Causality as we understand it now is simply probabilistic. Like for example, I'm playing billiards. And I say, when I hit the cue ball in a certain way, then it will go in a certain way. Correct? So, is it the hitting of the cue ball that causes the cue ball to move? Or do we simply, instead of see causality, we only see a succession of events? Because it seems that right now, causality is not an objective reality. Causality is inferred by the mind from seeing events that happen one after the other. And when we see two events happening one after the other, that's the way we conclude, this event A probably causes this event B. But we can never really be certain. Why? Because how many times have we seen this event A precede this event B? No matter how many times you say, it is still a finite number of times. And because it is a finite number of times, a finite number of observation, it is always possible that if you do A, B will not follow. Why? Because it is simply established through habit that A causes B. That is what is called in philosophy the problem of induction. And if you cannot determine the cause from the effect of such a thing as a billiard ball, how in the world would you determine the cause of the universe itself? That seems to be a little bit bordering into hubris already. Okay? If you cannot determine what causes a billiard ball to slide this way, how can you determine that God is the cause of everything in the universe? Okay, here's the thing. Let's digress a little. Red said that you cannot go infinitely into the past. Why? Because sooner or later there will have to be a singularity where everything started, and because of that, the universe must be finite. Okay. But you actually ignored one possibility. You're talking about this particular universe. And it might be possible, sooner or later, we might discover, oh, we are actually part of an oscillating universe. A big bang and a big crunch, and a big bang and a big crunch, and a big bang and a big crunch. The laws of physics break down towards the end and at the beginning. The laws of physics actually are rebuilt as the universe is growing. So in that sense, probably, yes, the universe started, it has a beginning, but it came from another universe, which came from another universe, which came from another universe. So the cause of the universe is not necessarily God. Okay? Because you can only say that something is the cause of something, I mean the cause with a capital T, it has to happen all the time. Okay? Practically an infinite number of observations. How many times have we seen universes being created? I think it's less than one. See, we haven't even seen this universe being created. So how do we know that God is the cause of this universe? I would be more inclined to believe that God is simply just a placeholder. It's an empty referent. You just say, the cause of the universe. Okay, God. What is this God? I don't know. It's just the cause of the universe. Okay? So what kind of God would that be? In order for you to be able to properly describe God, you will have to define God. And probably said, you cannot define God because God is supposedly an infinity. When you define something, you make it definite. But you cannot make definite something that is supposedly infinite. And at the same time, well, they were saying that something supposedly infinite cannot even exist. So I think that's a little mind-boggling. You're talking about something that's infinite, that cannot exist, you're trying to define it, and then you're giving characteristics of it. And then, at the same time, I do not see any referent in reality. And then when I talk to all the different theologians, they're all contradictory. And when I talk to all the people, how has religion impacted their lives? Well, they think of God only in church, if they go to church. There's no real effect. Besides, Red told us that religion has an effect on people's lives. Yes, it does. But religion is not the only thing affecting people. Because whether or not you believe in God, it's not the belief that counts. It's what you do based on that belief. You have people who believe in God. You have people who claim to know about God, and yet, what are their lifestyles? How do they live their lives? How do they treat other people? You also have people who do not believe in God, and yet, if you look at them, they seem much better than some people who don't believe in a God. So if that is the case, does religion really cause a person to become a better person? It rests on a different perception of reality. And when you change your perception of reality, your arguments will not hold anymore because your premise will not become true anymore. And if your premises are not true, your argument might be valid, but it will not be sound. And what is it good for? It's good only for talking. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, Don said that we have a different idea of causality. I don't agree. Okay, that's impossible. No matter what science will tell us, that's simply silly. Okay, if I am here, I am bringing this one, I am the cause of this one. Now, what about probabilistic causes? It talks about probabilistic causes. Because in the universe, there are probably this is the cause of this one, and probably this is the cause of that one. But there is no such thing as probably this one has a cause, and probably this one has no cause. That's quite different. Actually, that probabilistic causes was raised by the article, The Eternal Universe, in the Filipino Printing's page. But he failed to distinguish two things. Probably this one is the cause of that one, or probably this one is the cause of that one. And then he confuses it with probably this one has a cause, and probably this one has no cause. Science is not telling the second one. Science is telling us about probabilistic causes. not probably not, this one has a cause or not. Okay? Science is very clear that things have causes. Okay, we call that as an axiomatic principle in science, the principle of continuity. Okay, things that moves. We know in the universe we have matter and motion. Okay, we only have two things in the universe: general classification, matter and motion. Matter and motion are connected to each other. Principle of continuity. Whatever moves, changes from one state to another state, it has a connection with something else. It is cause. But we cannot exactly determine some of the causes. That's what we mean by probabilistic causes. Not that we cannot know, not that probably they don't have cause. That's not what science is telling us. Okay? Next, the infinity of God. God is, there is no such thing as actual infinity, but God is infinite. No. God is not infinite. When we say that there is no actual infinity, St. Thomas said that there can never be infinite multitude and magnitude, because multitude and magnitude fall under the category quantity or numbers. Why? Because numbers are succession or regression. Now, whatever that expands by succession or progression can never be actually infinite. Okay? Because there is always a succession, and every succession is finite. Now, the idea infinite, although it is used by religious people to attribute to God, is actually philosophically inappropriate. Why? Because our idea of infinite is taken from the things around us. We cannot really say that God is infinite. So what is God? God simply, there is no succession in God. Because if you say there is no infinity in God, if you say that God is infinite, you are saying that there is succession in God. That's not possible. Because if there is succession in God, then God is in time. If God is in time, then He cannot exist for eternity. So what is the eternity of God? It's not infinite succession of time. It is simply the simultaneous comprehension of finite universe. Take note, when I say simultaneous comprehension of finite universe, there is no succession there, because it is a simultaneous comprehension of every deity that the universe has, because He is the creator of everything that exists, from the very biggest to the very smallest. He comprehends it in a single act of undivided comprehension or intellectual knowledge. There is no succession, because if there is succession, then it follows the reason that there is time in God. Now that is impossible. If that is the case, there is no universe, there is no God. Because if there is no God, there can never be universe also. So again, we cannot say that God is infinite in the sense that it is an infinite succession, because there is no succession in God. It is a total simultaneous comprehension of every finite universe. Okay? Now, is that possible? Yes, we have a model of that. Actually, we can understand it, and there is no logical contradiction to it. We can explain it clearly. The idea is distinct. It is a simultaneous comprehension of finite things. For instance, you have a computer. You know the software. The software comprehends everything that the computer will function. Okay, so we have a model, although not perfectly.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a God that is not infinite. But if we have a God that is not infinite, do we have a God that is finite? Because as I can recall, logically speaking, the contradiction of infinite is finite. And according to the principle of non-contradiction, there can be nothing in between. So God is either a finite God, which exists, or an infinite God, which cannot exist. And we are actually stuck between the two. In any case, we are also said that there is no such thing as succession with God. God is continually, permanently, eternally in the present. That everything that happens in this world, God perceives. God perceives. And that means if He perceives it already, then it must be real. So like I said earlier, the contention still stands. Is the afterlife infinite or finite? Because it seems the theologians would say the afterlife is infinite. And if God can already perceive the infinite afterlife as an actual thing, then that means that the afterlife is an actual infinite. And if the afterlife is an actual infinite, again, an actual infinite could exist despite the existence of a finite God. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually very, well, eye-opening, because I often thought that God was infinite in wisdom, infinite in goodness, infinite in power. But when he says that there is no succession with God, he says that, okay, God is not infinite in time. Okay. But he did not address the question, how about his power? Is it infinite or is it finite? His wisdom, is it infinite or is it finite? Because if he says it's finite, fine. But if he says that if it's infinite, I would need to ask again, is that potential infinity or is that actual infinity? Is God potentially infinite in knowledge, or is God really actually infinite in knowledge? Those are questions that are very important. Because we have to be very careful in answering that. Otherwise, we might be going against our traditional concept of what God is. Remember earlier I talked about standards. What are our standards for what God is? Because we go against those standards, then probably what we're talking about isn't actually God at all. Maybe we're making something up. Or maybe our standards from the very beginning were actually wrong. Well, I wouldn't be surprised, because where did we get these standards for God in the first place? Correct? But anyway, like I said, I just have the contention here that I'm quite surprised. We either have a finite God which exists despite an infinite afterlife, or we have an infinite God which cannot exist. So that for me is quite puzzling. And I will actually await your questions to me and to Red, because right after this 5-minute speech, you guys will be allowed to ask several questions to which we will actually both answer them to the best of our abilities. Thank you very much.